In their travels, during their time in the Inquisition, Solus and Varric had many conversations, but one in particular has always stood out to me, in part because of its lore value, and in part because of the message it conveyed. It goes like this. I'm sorry to have bothered you with my questions about your people, Varric. I see so much of the world in dreams, humans, my own people, even Kunari. Dwarves alone were lost to me, save scattered fragments of memory where some spirit cared to watch. Now I know why I see so little. And why is that? Dwarves are the severed arm of a once mighty hero, lying in a pool of blood, undirected, whatever skill at arms it had gone forever. Although it might twitch to give the appearance of life, it will never dream. I'd avoid mentioning that to any Carta, chuckles. This, of course, is ironic given what Solus apparently has done to the dwarven people, but I wanted to use this as a metaphor for my experience with Dragon Age The Veilguard, within the context of the Dragon Age IP, when compared to Dragon Age's history and legacy, for it's very much the dwarf that Solus speaks of, twitching to give a semblance of life, but indeed lifeless and dreamless in its content and aspirations, a pale moon-cast shadow of something once great, left to gutter and die in its shallow ineptitude. This then, lords and ladies, is my non-review review of Dragon Age The Veilguard. Why do I call this my non-review review? Because for all my strivings and desire to finish this game, I could not. And at some point in time, after 60+ hours, as you can see on the screen, I simply could not continue. So great was the toll exacted on my soul whilst playing this mockery of a Dragon Age game, but soldiered on in an attempt to persevere. However, I am but a man, and all men have their limits, and so it was with great regret that I surrendered, granting victory to this game, whereas I had once sought to defeat this monstrosity. And yes, I've heard and seen that the last 5 hours of the game pick up a fair bit, but I cannot imagine playing 90% of a game that is mediocre to terrible, only to experience a halfway decent finale. It reminds me of the Starfield rhetoric about how you're supposed to continue playing another 50 hours to really begin to enjoy it. Still, I'm not without my experiences and impressions of the game, and it is with a truly heavy heart that I now share these with you. Ye fortunate ones, benighted as you are of this abomination, masquerading as finely crafted art, and as a Dragon Age game. And a final point on this channel is not my job, and is but a hobby in my life. Were I to do this full time, I would have forced myself to continue and finish the game. But life is short, and I do not wish to waste my remaining years on Earth playing tripe. It's simply not worth it. Let us begin with the 3 sole positives I found in the game. The environmental scenes and art are without question the most beautiful and graphically inspired to date in a Dragon Age game, and indeed, any game Bioware has ever made. But such vistas can only do so much to hold back the darkness clawing at you from the shadows. They are nice to look at for a moment, perhaps 2, mayhaps 3, but the lovely views soon fade into the utter blandness that so characterizes the rest of the game. The other positive that occurred to me is that the game runs fairly smoothly. I had no crashes, very few bugs, and minimal technical issues. And in this sense, the game is quite polished, a miracle considering the game's many other flaws. But clearly, the technical team that made this was of a different caliber than the creative one. And finally, the hair looks quite good. Hands down, best hair in any Bioware game ever. As I've paid my homage to the positives, so too demand of me the gods their tribute in the blood of the game's negatives. And there are many such negatives, lords and ladies. So many that I am sure it escapes my mortal ability to cite them all. With that said, I shall endeavor to enumerate the worst of the game's sins. I've already spoken fairly extensively of the falsely praised character creator in my impressions video, but I should address it here briefly. It is, at best, average. All character models, from body to face, are extremely masculinized, such that while you can effortlessly produce a male character of satisfactory appearance, you will potentially labor away for hours to do the same for a female character, for the simple reason that beginning with a masculine baseline makes it easier to create males, surprise, surprise, and that much harder to create females. Virtually all of the faces have a masculine structure to them, including such things as being wide-set, strong chins and jaws, and a host of other minor features that in their totality are well suited to males, but significantly detract from the creation of a feminine face. And then there are the bodies. The bodies are, again, all incredibly masculine, and unlike the faces that with sufficient effort allow for the creation of something vaguely feminine, no effort, nor hoping, nor praying will allow for the creation of a figure one might actually associate with a woman, let alone a voluptuous woman. In short, there's absolutely nothing feminine about any of the body types on offer. As I had stated in the previous video, I had originally set out to create a buxom female dwarf warrior, but to no avail, and soon thereafter just made a male. Now, I have some thoughts on this beyond the technical aspects I've criticized. When you have an RPG, something that Dragon Age The Veilguard purports to be, and you have a character creator whose purpose is to allow you to make the character you want to roleplay as, and it so woefully falls short of that goal, then your character creator has failed. For all this talk of inclusivity, the character creator takes a dump on anyone who wishes to play a nice-looking woman. Furthermore, I cannot for the life of me imagine that this lack of inclusion of properly female faces and bodies was not intentional. You don't make a character creator with alleged options for large buttocks and bosoms, and sliders that are supposed to do just that, with the inability to actually render them large without some intention behind it. Now, I'm no telepath and cannot guess exactly why this is, but it's been clearly done with purpose and intent, and completely destroys the possibility of playing the character you actually want to play. In this sense, the much vaunted character creator, spoken of in such glowing tones before being exposed to disinfectant public sunlight, utterly fails to deliver. Shame on those who sang its praises, for they are either ignorant or simply liars. I know not which. Now, I've said much about the art style in the game. It's immature, cartoony, and smacks of Disney, and fails to deliver the appropriate visual tone of a game in which the world is ending, which coincidentally goes hand in hand with the tone of the writing. The art style and direction is plainly not acceptable for a game of this sort, and you never truly get used to it, as you are reminded of its shortcomings in every scene where weight and poignance would have been amplified manifold had they only chosen a traditionally realistic art style. And the strange thing is, they had in fact done this at some point in time in the past, looking at the character concept art from but 2 years ago, which again leads us to the painful conclusion, as with the character creator, that someone had tampered with the originally more realistic and grittier artistic tone in the game in favor of an art style befitting of children. Not teenagers, mind you, but that of 10-year-olds. People have attempted to address this with reshades and turning off bloom effects with minimal degrees of success, but one can only do so much to turn the tide of an ocean when all the currents push against you. The art style is not just puerile, it is loathsome, and leaves a taint upon the eyes far greater than any taint a Grey Warden has ever borne. And now we come to the much lauded combat and gameplay. Do you not see a pattern of false praise here? Of features esteemed most highly before the public could lay its hands on them? But I digress. The combat is without question the worst combat ever designed in a Dragon Age game. It's repetitive, time-consuming, and simply boring. But the web of deception woven here is such that this deceit only properly becomes apparent after having wasted copious hours slogging through the tedium of the combat in the first place. Initially, it seems fresh and interesting, with its seemingly expansive RPG-esque trees and possibilities and specialties. But after some time, you quickly realize that this is all an illusion. Most of the nodes, for example, on the tree do little to actually make gameplay varied or fun. They're simply there for filler purposes, rather than being truly impactful. I played a warrior, and it didn't really feel like a warrior, as the flashy and bright special moves are executed in a manner reminiscent of a mage, and for what I've gathered and seen in other videos, in some sense, all the classes, whether warrior, rogue, or mage, play, and above all, look like mage gameplay. My warrior, for example, could summon spears of fire from the sky, throw fire grenades, cast energy-sapping necrotic whirlwinds, and create what could only be called a spiritual weapon, similar to the spell, to batter down the enemy. Hardly a warrior. And though this initially felt somewhat novel and fun, the fun wears off quickly, for we now come to the next flaw in the combat, the horrendous health sponginess of the enemies. Now, I elected to play on Nightmare, as I've always done in every Dragon Age game hitherto, telling myself what could go wrong. Not bothered by the inability to turn down the difficulty of said nightmare, should I elect to. After all, I've never dropped the difficulty before, so why should I do it now? How woefully and painfully wrong I was with this thought, though. Because yes, the enemies are health sponges. And even with a well-girded and equipped warrior, you must continually hit them again and again and again to whittle down their massive health pools. Even the combos, which you are encouraged to make use of, do little, and the combat is, to put it briefly, just a chore. There is no good game design here, simply massive health pools, which is always bad game design in my opinion, used to compensate for a lack of creative solutions to actually improve gameplay. And then we have the constant barrage of reskinned enemies, using the same endlessly repetitive repertoire of moves and attacks. The amount of enemies that are simply reskinned ogres in their moveset is astonishing, for example. In short, Dragon Age The Veilguard's combat drains you in a manner akin to a succubus, as when first encountering the succubus, you feel excitement and delight, perhaps even the anticipation of pleasure, but as she drains you, slowly but surely, you become numb, you lose your vigor and vitality, and what once seemed to be a prospective pleasure becomes a literal soul-draining experience, leaving you naught but a husk of your former self. That, in a nutshell, is the abomination called Dragon Age The Veilguard's combat, a thinly veiled deception of a promise of fun wrapped in layers of lies, leaving you enervated and empty. And, to be honest, this was the primary factor for my unwillingness to slog through the game. Had you been able to turn down the difficulty to avoid the painfully boring combat, I likely would have continued. I probably should mention the companions, who are immortal and offer cooldown-based combos, something I've already mentioned. But seeing as how they do very little damage, their biggest contribution, however, seems to be shouting, "Nice shot, Rook," and "We did it," or "Good job, everyone," during and after combat. While it's not totally useless, you might as well not have them for all intents and purposes. They do that much. With these mechanics, Bioware said, "Begone, RPG." And I wish this were the worst of things when it came to gameplay, because the MMO mobile game DNA is ever present in this mockery of an RPG. All around you are boxes and crates, which only encourages you to smash them constantly, as you might get some semi-useful items in them, which of course just turns into another form of tedium. You are presumably already familiar with the smash green pot for health potions routine, and crafting is of course non-existent. You merely upgrade the many boringly unvaried pieces of equipment you find, which are only rarely differentiated, and even uniques hardly feel unique most of the time. In summary, the most enjoyable thing about the combat and gameplay in Dragon Age The Veilguard was my decision to stop playing the game and torturing myself with it. There's absolutely nothing here that one could categorize as traditionally RPG, and I absolutely loathe what they've done to the systems in the game. Again, Bioware has cast the magic spell, RPG, begone. But these things I have spoken of are but peccadillos in the sea of sins this game has committed, for the worst of them is not yet upon us. And these sins weigh heavy upon the souls of the developers, for they are grave. May the gods show them mercy, for I shall have none. Let us begin with Rook, so called after the apparently minor chess piece. Rook is the protagonist, the head honcho, the main dude, if you will. And yet, he always feels so hollow, so bereft of character and background. Rather, he feels like the sum of the commands the programmers put into his responses, and the wooden, uninteresting writing that brought him to life. I wouldn't be surprised if Rook were in fact a zombie. Rook never feels like a person, or a fully fleshed out individual with a background and history. Yes, there's an attempt at doing this with your faction's background. I briefly dabbled with the Veil Jumpers a bit, and there your defining background piece was that you sacrifice some maps to save some people, and the Veil Jumper elders are angry at you for it. But I spent the lion's share of my time with the Grey Wardens, as I foolishly thought, we all began our Dragon Age journey as a Grey Warden. Why not end it this way? Your defining moment as a Grey Warden is when you, apparently, dumped a whole town on a bunch of Darkspawn whilst defying the orders of your superior. And this so-called background is repeated over and over and over in the beginning of the game, in a failed attempt to flesh out your character, and employed so bluntly and without skill that it soon becomes trite and meaningless.
Back in the Grey Wardens, I was with a group of recruits outside this village dealing with the Darkspawn incursion. Our orders were to wait for reinforcements, but we knew that by the time they arrived, everyone in that village would be dead.
Something?
Rook, you've got this. I've seen your work. Like that time you ditched your orders for a better strategy during a Darkspawn attack.
Every time I look at this, I can hear that little girl thanking me for saving her village from Darkspawn.
You are Rook, the Grey Warden that dropped a town on evil Darkspawn. There's no exposition of your history beyond that, save some weirdly placed mementos in the beginning of the game that are meant to be there for exposition, but do little in service to that goal. No, you're just Rook, the Grey Warden who dumped a town on invading Darkspawn. Oh, and you also disobeyed orders whilst doing so. This, among other issues, leads to a perplexingly boring and uninteresting character that you are forced to play for untold hours as Rook the Grey Warden Town Dropper. Now obviously we could contrast this with the profound and deeply fleshed out origins for which Dragon Age Origins is rightly famed, but we needn't go that far, as even Dragon Age Inquisition does a significantly better job at fleshing out your character than Dragon Age The Veilguard, which admittedly is not saying much, but still.
We discussed how to make people understand that a dwarf could be a herald of Andraste.
Tell them stranger things have happened. The Maker moves in mysterious ways and all that.
Yes, he certainly does. Leliana was telling me rumors that... it sounds preposterous, but... there are stories circulating that you were part of a criminal organization. The Dwarven Carta.
I was hoping that secret would keep a little longer.
You mean... well, this complicates things. Were you only smuggling at least? Exchanging a few goods on the surface?
I guarded caravans of smuggled goods. Rivals often ambushed us. There were protection rackets, blood feuds, targeted...
That's quite enough. I have a clear picture. I'll handle the subject of your past carefully, Herald. I'm sure you can't miss that life.
Why wouldn't I? I was the best at what I did. My old bosses are probably tearing their hair out trying to replace me.
I will take your word for it, so long as they won't be able to win you back. That sort of competition is the last thing we require.
I have tried to serve faithfully, to understand the burden I was meant to carry.
That is always a struggle.
You're not sure about this?
There's no faith without doubt. Yet I believe this is the only path before us. There would be no Inquisition without you. How it will serve, how you lead, that must be yours to decide.
I will restore what Corypheus could never destroy. I am but a servant of the light. The Inquisition belongs to the faithful.
Wherever you lead us.
As you can see in these clips, the Inquisitor feels like someone who came from somewhere and is going somewhere, as you help to shape their personality with your choices. And though I didn't touch upon it, one thing that is non-existent in Dragon Age The Veilguard, in terms of implementation, is reactivity concerning class elements. Now, Dragon Age Origins had elaborate ways of unlocking specializations, and even Dragon Age Inquisition had fairly extensive conversations, allowing them to further shape your character to your liking.
I understand there's a way I could become a Templar, or gain the power, at least.
Why would you?
Templars use their abilities in service of the Maker. Even if I can't take the vows, I would do the same.
Do you think I broke all my vows? Lyrium binds us to the Chantry. Our actions serve the Maker. Gaining Templar powers will not make you righteous or right. Believe me.
What is it like to have powers? To take lyrium?
Strange. After a while, your abilities become instinct. You wield them as you would a sword, without thought.
Do you think that's what it's like to be a mage?
No. Templar abilities are not magic. You draw on the lyrium in your blood and your training, not some innate ability.
You're sure it feels different? How do you know?
I just do.
You've been through this. I could use your advice.
You have the physical training, but you must prepare mentally as well. The Order would have you sit vigil. You are not bound by their rules, but if you go through with this, it may help.
I don't expect you to understand, but you shouldn't worry.
I will trust your judgment.
I must admit, I've never been able to understand Southern Templars. Back home, a Templar shows up and all you think is, oh dear, which Magister did I cross this time? Here, it's quite different. You're not thinking of actually joining their order, are you?
I find their talents useful, that's all.
Useful against mages. Speaking as a mage, it's a little disconcerting. Are you aware you smell different?
I do?
No one's mentioned it. Lyrium has a particular smell, like the air after a lightning strike. Not that I go about smelling you. I'm just saying.
Now, admittedly, character reactivity and class reactivity is very important to me. But contrast this with Dragon Age The Veilguard, which only has its cheap mage-like specializations in the most cosmetic sense, and it just fails in this regard. There is occasional racial-specific dialogue as pertains to the main story for dwarves, and based on observations of other people's playthroughs elves, but it's not especially well implemented, and typically fails in impactful delivery, like so much else in this wannabe simulacrum of an RPG. Then there is the lackluster voice acting. Dwarves in Dragon Age have a canonically American voice, so I went with that, and the male American voice actor is just terrible. Flat, weak, too high-pitched, and without any sort of oomph to it.
Her in the Great Hall one day, and she suddenly turned and asked me if I wanted a nug.
What, like for lunch? If I had a copper for every time someone's asked me if I eat nug.
Liliana wouldn't joke like that. No, she just bred them as pets.
So, did you take the nug?
No! What am I gonna do with a nug?
Now contrast this with the male American VA in Dragon Age Inquisition, and you'll see the difference.
Dwarf as a holy messenger? I wouldn't have thought it either. Until I felt the truth in my heart. I am the will of Our Lady manifest. I am the herald of Andraste. She sent me to remind you of your sacred duty. A shield against dark magic. Knights who will end the breach.
But by far the absolutely worst aspect of this game is the extremely poor pacing, writing, and just overall Disney-like tone of the game. You never truly feel a sense of urgency or that the world is ending.
Well, wasn't expecting to fight an ogre today. Then again, I also didn't expect to learn that my gods are rampaging around and trying to end the world. Just one of those days.
It's just very lacking across the board. So let's start with the classic Balara scene, which serves as your introduction to this character.
Oh, shit! No! Okay. Try again. Deep breaths. There. Oh, God. Damn it. Oh, no! Sorry. Just breaking things.
I think this scene best embodies the overwhelming sense that this game was just made for juveniles. It has the music, the immature awkwardness, and everything else that just screams Disney. Everything in Dragon Age The Veilguard is hand-holding and needs to be spelt out to you like you're an idiot, with no ability to read between the lines or intuit things. One of my biggest disappointments in the game, one of many such ones, was upon returning from the siege of Weishaupt, sitting at the table with your so-called team, as they are called, and everyone in succession just repeating over and over how something is troubling them and that they are weighed down by some burden, hitting you over the head with it like a sledgehammer, and this scene was instrumental in making me want to quit the game.
Please. Enough. Stop arguing. We've got no chance if we turn on each other. Chaos helps the gods and hurts this team. It will get us killed, one by one. So get it together. We need to figure out how to defeat them.
We're all in agreement on that point, Rook. But the question remains, how? We barely survived against one of the gods.
I nearly got her.
Nearly. But spite is a creature of raw emotion. Your turmoil over what befell Treviso feeds him. Both of you vying for control. It's no wonder you missed such a rare opportunity.
I think we've all been distracted.
I've been preoccupied myself after discovering that hand of glory.
And I can't stop worrying about my new magic and what it means.
Or what the Venatori are up to in Docktown.
Until those problems are resolved, we will not be prepared to face the gods. A moment of inattention, a single lapse, could prove fatal, and the gods will allow no second chances.
He's right, Rook.
Of course, the scene is there to set up the Mass Effect 2 style final mission later on. I personally find this lazy and uncreative. And unlike Mass Effect 2's version of it, the game, as you've seen before, literally tells you how everyone is in a bad headspace, so better finish their quests. I'm not even going to talk too much about how bad the writing and delivery of Tasha's character is. You're probably familiar with it already, but suffice to say, the character is easily the worst written character ever in a Bioware game, and perhaps game period. Annoying, arrogant, preachy, obnoxious, and completely lacking in grace. And that's even without all the social political messaging. All these poorly implemented elements come together in the game to be integrated into an extremely incompetent whole. The bad combat, the art style, the voice acting, the writing, none of it is good. And then you have the lore. I have experienced many of the lore revelations in my own playthrough, but not all of them, as I had to quit. Still, I have spoilt myself with all the rest. I have seen it all. Whatever the plan the original writers had for Dragon Age, and however they wanted to end this series, surely they did not want this. In the end, every single bloody revelation, from the old gods to the Titans to the Blight, was just, the ancient elves did it. That is your answer to everything in this game concerning the history of Thetis, save for the masterfully constructed Illuminati ending, which I mentioned in a previous video. Many people have said it before, but Duncan didn't die for this. You want answers? Well, the elves did everything. There you go. How cheap and convenient all this is. Oh, and I almost forgot, all of southern Thetis is gone, destroyed by the Blight, which of course the elves created because the elves did everything. Now there are ways of creating a hard reset for a series, but this is not one of them. My original resolution to play this game was bound up in its lore. I wanted to understand how Thetis came to be, what it is, and I did end up finding that out, albeit in the bluntest, most unsubtle way possible. Playing Dragon Age The Veilguard and forcing myself to slog through this mess has been one of the worst gaming experiences I can think of in recent years, and the worst of any Bioware game I have ever played, hands down, no questions asked. At least in Mass Effect Andromeda, the combat was fun. Dragon Age The Veilguard couldn't even achieve that. In the end, my face was simply too tired to endure it all. On this channel, I want to talk about and cover games I enjoy and think highly of, not this exquisitely bad pile of dung. I just want the pain to be over at this stage. I might talk about Dragon Age The Veilguard or Bioware in a media context going forward. But this is the end of me touching this game. As I said earlier, may the gods have mercy on the developers, because I cannot forgive them for this aberration of a game. A bad game in general, and an absolutely terrible, horrible Dragon Age game. It's almost as if the developers set out to punish us with this slop. And in this sense, they have indeed succeeded. I have nothing more to say on this dross, and I cannot in good conscience recommend this game to anyone who enjoys RPGs, Dragon Age, or even games period. But in any event, I do thank you for tuning in, and if you like my videos and my content, you can leave a like, comment, share, and subscribe, as it really helps out the channel. It's much appreciated. And I will check you out next time, hopefully in a more joyful, happier video. Until then, take care.